On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Kanat Bektemirov. He is the CTO of SupplyPike. We're going to be talking about an interesting aspect of his journey as a CTO, is his involvement on the sales side. And having that engineering perspective has actually helped Kanat out a lot. And we're going to be talking about the roles he's played on the sales side, to the extent of how it's helped him in product and engineering, aligning those disciplines with sales. Also going to be talking about how he's going to divest himself of some of the hats. I mean, he actually wears a lot of hats, and it's going to be interesting to see how he's been tackling some of this. Kanat, thanks for being on the podcast.
Hey, glad to be here, Amir.
Awesome, man. Let's start off at the top. Two things. Tell us what SupplyPike does. And I know as CTO, it's pretty traditional to be involved in technology, but also at a startup, you tend to wear a lot of hats. So just tell us what some of your responsibilities as well.
Okay. Yeah, we are a B2B supply chain SaaS company based out of Fayetteville, Arkansas. We recently raised our Series B and then are about 120 people or so. Our entire goal is to help consumer packaged good companies work together with, big box retailers like Walmart and Target. There's lots of regulations and compliance go into these retail operations, so we try to bake all of that knowledge into easy to digest, actionable information in our apps. We've been doing this for a few years. I've definitely done a little bit of everything. Started with the development, actually building our first few products, to scaling up our engineering teams, and then sort of got more involved in our growth side of things. That's where I started getting a lot more involved with sales and just the overall company strategy. But these days, we recently hired a SVP of sales, so now I'm back more into our product development and engineering side of things.
There you go. I guess we'll kind of work backwards and get to the current state and talk about that SVP hire. But I guess when you first started, I mean, you guys raised a good round, obviously in a situation where you can grow and hire and kind of bring in specific people. But going back to when you actually had a lot more of the sales responsibility, even before that, were you finding yourself involved in sales earlier days of SupplyPike? Was it a case of somebody had to fill the role, or just how did you come about having more involvement in sales than maybe you originally had thought?
Yeah, so the history of SupplyPike is slightly different. So I'll just give some high levels.
Sure.
Initially, we were a part of a bigger company called K-Stack, building apps for companies like K-Stack. But at some point, we split as our own, raised some Series A. At that point, the main people were mostly all technical people. So our CEO, TJ, also comes from a CS and development background. So at the time, board thought we should bring an external sort of a person to lead our sales efforts. So we brought somebody from a big name company. Fast forward a year or two later, that didn't work out. That person didn't have much of an experience in startups or selling software. So at that point we had built a sales team from that side, but we had an event where we let go of that person and that team, and it was mostly for TJ to figure out how we're going to actually do business development and sales. So I sort of stepped away from the engineering side to help more of that side. We didn't know anything, so we just started watching a bunch of stuff on Startup School and Y Combinator, Demand Curve by, what was his name, Julian Shapiro, a lot of the content on Stripe's Atlas stuff, so Patrick McKinsey, all of their articles. Started learning it from scratch, and what we found out is in the past, we had failed at enterprise sales. So we're like, okay, let's just, start with small companies. So I started our lead gen team at the time. So was a lot less involved in the engineering side of things. So hired a few people, hired a few interns, Started doing a bunch of cold emails, cold outreach, just from the limited knowledge we had from the resources. Next thing you know, we were generating the most number of demos. In our first month, we generated more demos than we had generated all of the prior year. And all of that was just simple stuff like automating some cold outreach emails, and making it somewhat personalized. Not just like copy a bunch of lists and send mass email, but like actually clean up the list. Put some personalized pictures, which also can be automated. So started that effort, but the next problem was we were getting all these demos, but we didn't know we weren't converting to the actual customers. So that became its own problem. That's where we had to learn about how to actually pitch. Start challenger sales and a few other sales methods that I had I had never heard of. But the only thing we were good at was reaching out to a bunch of other founders and figure out what they were doing, how they were doing, and for inspirations. So we basically went from $0 in revenue to about $1 million in our first year just from doing cold emails. Yeah.
So maybe to go back, and actually I want to talk about the pre-sales as well, but to go back and talk about what you just mentioned in terms of you with a couple of interns start tackling cold email, personalizing, and I guess pretty much any salesperson would maybe you're using HubSpot or similar tools to personalize and send the drip campaigns out. Obviously, without a sales background, you were very effective in generating $1 million on your own. Obviously, talking to other founders. Was there anything different in your pitch potentially, or was your pitch, because of your technical background being the CTO, or was it a different angle to it? I'm just curious because obviously that seems like a pretty good momentum for year one.
Well, by taking the demand curve course by Julian and them, we just kind of learned what's a good sales pitch, what's a good email, what's a bad email. You don't want to, you kind of know it yourself because I get those emails every day. You don't want the paragraph long emails. You just kind of send a short and sweet email to the point, but also that has a somewhat of a FOMO in the email saying, so it's like, hey, did you know you're losing out this much? Because we actually know your sides of the business. And then we would also do stuff like I said, we deal with consumer package companies. So we would send all these interns to go to the stores and take selfies with these products, or even have them buy and come to our office and take selfies. So it's not just getting the list of emails and sending people. We're actually trying to personalizing it, but not to the point of oh, I read your LinkedIn post or Twitter. Those are kind of too annoying. But it's hey, at least we did a little bit of research. We know your title. You might be the relevant contact. So that was the biggest hitter. But since coming from the engineering background, you sort of take this as a challenge. So people, I don't know, from my understanding, they just get bunch of lists from conferences. But if you sort of look at it, almost every company has the same email format. So we wrote some automation scripts to see, what phones are valid, phone numbers are valid, what emails are valid. Maybe there's a few variations of email format. So we use something like Mailgun to verify which one is actually valid and what's not.
I do like the angle of, obviously, I mean, the personalization is one thing. I do agree with you. I mean, we all get the, vendor emails, and, I saw on LinkedIn you said X, and it's kind of well, of course, I mean, a lot of people see that, but I like the fact that you guys went and, you're targeting CPG companies. You went and actually took pictures with their products. So if somebody's seeing that, it's not, it is one way to automate, different drip campaign tools to, put in and fill in words or whatever. But you can't really automate that. Somebody standing with a selfie of a can of beans from whoever. I mean, that's work taken. I mean, somebody's going to see that and go, okay, this person, it's personal, and not personal just to me, but it's personal to me and my company because they're targeting me specifically with this campaign. So I think that's actually quite clever.
I mean, that was our best way of personalizing. And it's not that hard. There's Walmarts and Targets everywhere here.
Yeah. Hey, you'd be surprised. I think there's some salespeople that probably would have missed that opportunity, knowing, the business, you're trying to work with CPG companies. Let's go get their products, take a picture of it. I think a lot of people who have, may not be exactly, CPG products that they could go in a store and take pictures of it like this. I think there's a lot of takeaways if you're, trying to break into some company that you probably could personalize it to that level without, having the product next to you. So I think actually that's really clever. You mentioned reaching out to other founders. Can you maybe talk to us about what that exactly was? Like, what were you hoping for in terms of guidance, and what were you getting back? Because a lot of people, would like to get that type of feedback. Some people do reach out, some people don't. But what was your experience?
For me, that's the only way I learn. Every 3 to 4 months, I reach out to a bunch of my contacts to see to talk about the problem I usually have. But specifically around then, it was mostly we asked our investors to connect to other portfolio companies, and usually founders speak the best. They don't usually have the sales lingo, or they've gone through this process. So we've talked to people who are around our space, or who are like a step or two ahead of us. You just get fresh perspectives because they're always full of energy. Even though they might not be implementing some stuff, they usually have some ideas. So we also got those inspirations from. So we heard about the crazy stuff people were doing at the conferences, like to get attention. Like we heard about crazy like in-person visits people were doing. So we get all these inspirations, and then tried to think about how could we do it ourselves. There was like a campaign we did like in first year. We did a literal video that's personalized to every single company. So we picked out like the top 100 CPGs, got their about sales numbers from places like Nielsen, IRA, shot personalized videos, like with like a really high quality cameras, good looking actors, well, some are employees, and sent those personalized videos, and that yielded really high results as well. Like we even send like a bunch of gift baskets with their pictures and their companies printed out on their brochures. We made personalized landing pages for each of our outreach companies. So I don't know. It felt like more of like a engineering puzzle than it's like a cold email, cold outreach. Because like from engineering background, like what's possible. It's like, personalized landing pages. How hard can it be? It's just that's not to get parameters. That's it.
I think it's interesting because, I think if you were to go ask, most people who are leading sales orgs, they're always looking for ways to personalize, looking for tools to personalize. And I think it's interesting as an engineer, you might not have been fully aware of all the techniques that a sales team could use, but you went out, figured it out, use your engineering background to figure out how to personalize more. But also some of that is non-technical, like it's not engineering, taking a picture, putting it in a gift basket, shooting a high quality video. I think it's a big difference when you see one of those, when you get some of the videos embedded in an email and they're super high quality. It does grab your attention versus something shot on the iPhone, potentially front facing camera. Obviously now they've gotten better, but nonetheless, in general, I think those are really clever. I guess, to kind of, jump forward to the next step in the process, because you obviously mentioned you guys figured this out, and it sounds like you guys are pretty, have some ingenuity to actually come up with ways to outreach, personalizing it. And then you have to go to the pitching side, which obviously somebody had to do. Obviously, the pre-sales role is different than sales. Who was responsible for pre-sales? Was that you on the team? Was it somebody else?
So pre-sales and lead gen we called it the same. So like somebody responds to an email, we hop on the call to do a quick, qualification call, see if we're actually talking to the right person or if they had the right problem. So it's the same. It was the same team, but the actual demo and the close were two different salespeople. The first year we had, so I I wasn't working with them directly day to day, but we were discussing and giving feedback to each other all the time. The pre-sales lead gen side was also only like 2-3 people the first year, plus a few interns. But the next year, once we figured it out, how things work, we scaled both of those teams up really to probably like 8 to 10 people each. So like account executives and lead gen side, we would call them sales development reps. I was in charge of the sales development reps, but the account executives were still under our CEO, which we still work really close every day.
I guess just a question, in terms of, I'm listening to you. You're pretty involved on the sales side, pretty involved. It includes pre-sales as well. You're still a CTO. How did you manage your time? Obviously, the context switching is expensive, but how did you manage your time to address sales and the engineering side? I mean, did you have somebody that was kind of helping carry a little bit more of the weight of the engineering side, or were you just literally splitting your time between all these activities?
By the time I started getting involved with the sales side of things. We had built a really good engineering culture and team already. So we had really good senior engineers that were, all on the same page as us. Our product managers were really good. They had a really good culture of working with engineers. And I have a really good director of engineering who is more on the people side of things rather than the technical guidance. So they were mostly leading the show themselves. Like I would get a lot more involved in stuff like hiring and maybe like some higher level architecture on newer products or services. But other than that, the team was mostly on their own. But I was probably splitting my time 50-50.
And I guess, as you had this involvement on the sales team, you're obviously in a small company, you're still involved with engineering. Product management is typically very sales driven in the early days. That had to be kind of useful to be on the front side, seeing the sales demand, sales questions, the sales requirements, and obviously still being responsible for some of the other areas in the company. How were you taking some of that feedback into your engineering and maybe some of the product side of the business?
Yeah, as we were setting up these processes, my main focus was like, okay, what am I good at? I'm good at setting up tools and processes. So we set up stuff like Chorus from day one for our calls and demos. We set up like sort of like the keyword detectors to email responses on stuff like Limlist, the tool we were using for email outreaches. Anytime, like I would get all the email replies to all of our sales emails. So anytime I saw responses, like in the early days, I was just sending screenshots or forwarding the emails to our product teams. And then on the Chorus calls, I would still review them once a week or so. I would take snapshots and then send to our product teams and our UX people anytime something looked wrong. But eventually, that became more of a formal process where the sales team and the product team set up sort of like the weekly debriefs on closed lost deals. The feature requests we're getting. So us seeing all that ahead of time sort of like triggered a lot of these conversations initially, but once the conversation started, they sort of figured it out on their own. I'm talking about the early days. Like right now, things are completely different.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, I think definitely referring back to before. I mean, you guys are, you mentioned a much larger company. You hired a SVP of sales, so obviously this dates a little bit further back. I guess just to touch on that, because I know you mentioned it at the top of the show. You just hired somebody new into the SVP role to help with sales. How have you, I guess, through the maturation of the company, have you divested yourself from the sales side? Is there a process that you had started, or kind of where are you with that?
Well, even on the lead gen side, I hadn't been as involved for the past year because, the first person we hired for this SDR role, she grew to be a team lead, manager, and eventually director. So by the time this SVP came, this person who was under me was already managing close to 20 people.
Nice.
So I wasn't involved as much after the first year and a half because we had already the processes, and then she was mostly leading the team. So when the time came for handoff, it was just like a one-person switch rather than the whole team. But a lot of this stuff carried over. This new experienced SVP, he knows a lot of stuff, and he came to an existing process, existing teams, and making it way better now.
When you went to hire this SVP, I guess you mentioned earlier that you had to rebuild the sales function. The right person wasn't in the seat. In hiring this new person, obviously you guys had process. You had this person grew into director role as well. How much of that early experience, or how much of having a process built out, did it affect who you were looking for in that SVP role?
Yeah, we probably talked to a lot of people, and then this person who we eventually hired, we probably interviewed him for like 4 days to make sure, because it's a senior level position. So as we were interviewing, we'd ask questions, and he would give us basically the same. The response would be like something we're already doing right now. But the problem is, we got to this point by so many trial and errors, whereas this guy already has an intuition, probably because he's already done this so many times before. So the biggest thing was, okay, we're still going the right direction. It just took us a lot of time because it was our first time doing it, didn't have a lot of experience. We failed a lot. Eventually, somewhat are doing this thing right. But a lot of our answers were the same. It's just, as we scale, we can't afford to do this anymore. Like we'd rather have somebody who's done it before. So that was the reassuring fact.
Awesome, man. I mean, it seems like quite a journey. I know a lot of early co-founders, early CTOs, wear multiple hats. In this case, you had a pretty interesting sales role, and it seems like you made the best out of it. So that's a great story.
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, I'm still involved a lot more, but it was fun times. We got to where we are now, but the next 10x. I couldn't do it.
There you go. I was going to ask you, I like to kind of see if there's, something you personally have a particular question, or there's a theme or a topic that you would like a future guest to talk about. It could be a single topic. It could be a single question. It could be really anything.
Yeah, I'm really curious. I imagine most technical founders, they start the company because they're interested in more of the technical side of things. But as soon as you get to 10 engineers, that you can't be focused on the technical stuff as much. Curious, what kind of tricks other CTOs do to keep their mind on still being interested in the more of the organizational and non-technical challenges the company is facing. How do they still invest in themselves to still keep those things interesting? Because most of the stuff I do these days are not much technical. So I still have to trick my brain to think this, like, okay, there's still something interesting here. How do I solve it?
That's interesting. Obviously, that problem-solving aspect is, why you got into technology. So that's a good question. I think that could be a good question for me to start asking potentially at the end of episodes. I like that. Ken, what's a good way of somebody getting a hold of you if somebody wants to follow up with you on anything you mentioned on the podcast? Is LinkedIn, Twitter, email? What's a good way?
Yeah, I'd love to talk to anybody. LinkedIn is probably the best way. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. I appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing your stories and kind of your journey. Obviously, you guys are kicking butt now, and sounds like a lot of valuable experiences along the way. So I appreciate you sharing.
Thanks for having me, Amir.
Thanks, Kanat. That's it for this episode. We'll be back again, different guests, different topic. Until then, two things. One, if you found the episode useful or interesting, share it with somebody. That's how the podcast has been growing, and I appreciate everyone who does that every week. Also, I think Kenneth's question is really interesting. As you start scaling your company, if you're a technical co-founder or you're early stage CTO, the engineering side gets built up, and you're less involved in technical components, but how do you still challenge yourself in driving interest in the non-technical aspects of your role? I think that'd be great to hear from. We could build a whole episode around that. So if you've gone through that, reach out, let me know. I'd love to have you on the show. Otherwise, that's it. Thank you and goodbye.